bear with me here. Nintendo is often seen as the most family-friendly and clean company out there, but I mean, they're not above appealing to the adults. Today, I just want to talk about the very few games that Nintendo has published that are rated M, or at least like 18 plus, wherever they are in the world. And this one is so silly, we might as well wait till the end to talk about it, but let's start where Nintendo started. And we're going all the way back to the GameCube, because this was the first time Nintendo's ever published M-rated games. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem was the very first Nintendo published game rated M. Now, some people may think this was on the N64 with games like Perfect Dark and Conker's Bad Fur Day, but technically speaking, those weren't published by Nintendo. They were published by Rare, who Nintendo owned like a 49% stake in at the time, and the vast majority of titles Rare put out on the Nintendo 64 were published by Nintendo. Rare was practically owned by Nintendo at the time, all this stuff. So, like, yeah, it's fair to maybe assume that, oh yeah, Conker's Bad Fur Day, that was published by Nintendo and that was rated M. But in reality, like, it was published by Rare themselves. Because, like, I mean, why would Nintendo want to publish that? As good of a game it may be, you don't need your name on that. But I feel like the N64 era was where Nintendo was starting to get some of that just spice in them, where they kind of wanted to get a little bit of that M-rated pie. I mean, Eternal Darkness started as an N64 project, but it wasn't until the GameCube where we got two of them here. One of them turned out to be, like, one of the most quintessential, amazing horror games of all time, and one of them was fucking Geist. Nintendo was still a family-friendly company at the time, but it definitely does feel like with the GameCube, they kind of wanted to get a bit of that edge going, you know? They always kind of pushed a bit of an edge in their advertising campaigns, especially in the 90s. I mean, you look back at, like, Super Nintendo commercials, and it's all about, like defying the man! Like, the power, play Yoshi's Island. But especially compared to competition like Sega and Sony, yeah, Nintendo was definitely the family-friendlier option of the bunch. I mean, like, look no further than Mortal Kombat on Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo. The first game, like, that is notorious for being like, oh wow, over at Nintendo, we're a bunch of little babies. Both the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat were censored. Like, it was like, instead of blood, you were seeing the, you know, sweat pour out. But the Sega Genesis version did have the blood code, so you can enter a cheat code and enable, you know, the blood in Mortal Kombat, whereas the Super Nintendo version was just fully censored all the way. Of course, when it came to, like, Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, the blood was in, like, all the versions of that game. So yeah, like pushing that Nintendo was like, oh wow, like, we can't have any of this on our platform. They would be like that, and then they would fold, you know? But Eternal Darkness was the very first time they put their name specifically on an M-rated product. And yeah, what a product to start this out. I cannot recall a single game like this from its era that is so spooky just in terms of the atmosphere. Just walking around and just kind of, you just get this sense of dread. It's so ominous and it's so damn cool. And it's something that I don't think any other survival horror game from this era, or many in general, can't really replicate. And that's just talking about the atmosphere of the game. You know, the whole hook of Eternal Darkness is the fact that it has the sanity effects, where they try to just make you feel like you're going crazy. You know, stuff like, oh man, your memory card was corrupted. Oh, the volume on the TV is going up and down. You know, stuff like that just breaks the fourth wall. That doesn't make it feel like, oh, the character in the game is scared. It kind of makes yourself go, it's just like, yo, what's going on here? And yeah, this is rated M for blood and gore and violence. Yeah, you know, that's fair. There's like this infamous bathtub scare in the game where you walk into a bathroom and it just zooms in on just this corpse in the bathtub. Yeah, you know, M rating is justified on this one. But enough about a good game. Let's talk about fucking Geist. Geist definitely felt a lot more like a company just came to Nintendo and showed them a project and were like, can you fund this? Can you publish this? And they said, sure. That's not to say Geist is a bad game. You know, it's no Eternal Darkness. And, you know, to be fair, it's not really what they were going for. But it is interesting that the two M-rated games Nintendo published on the GameCube, the first two M-rated games Nintendo ever published, kind of have, you know, a bit of a spooky overtone to them, because Geist is all about possession and being a ghost. I gotta be honest, Geist kind of has like some interesting concepts, but you know, being a first-person shooter from 2005 on the GameCube, and not a particularly amazing one outside of like some cool concepts. The fact that, hey, you know, you can possess things. You know, outside of that fact, like, it's not really great to play these days. It wasn't even particularly great to play back then. But it's mostly on the concept alone of the fact that you can possess other people and other things and what have you, you know, to make your way through the game. You know, that's just a cool concept. It definitely is a cool idea for a game, and I think it could definitely use like a remake or a remaster to tighten things up. But as it stands, yeah, it's just fucking Geist. Eternal Darkness definitely takes the cake in terms of the best M-rated games Nintendo published on the GameCube. Of course, there's not much competition, but let's be fair here. I'm gonna jump around a bit because Nintendo has distributed some M-rated games, and they distributed some on the GameCube, particularly Resident Evil 4 in Europe. That's something. I mean, they made a deal with Capcom to pretty much make the Resident Evil series exclusive to GameCube for that generation. So, I mean, they may not have been publishing the games, but at the very least, like, they wanted Resident Evil on the platform and they funded it, kinda. So it's like, okay. But I want to jump over to the Nintendo Switch for a bit. Yeah, we're going to skip the Wii and Wii U for a second because they distributed like a ton of M-rated games. So what does that mean? What does it mean Nintendo distributed the game rather than published? Well, to my understanding, it's mostly that Nintendo helped with the retail copies of these games, but, you know, the publishers are still the publishers of them. So, for example, Nintendo helped distribute Grand Theft Auto, the trilogy on Nintendo Switch, which is pretty insane. But, yeah, it is mostly on, like, you know, retail distribution. They didn't really do anything with the digital release. You know, they still didn't publish the game. So Rockstar Games still handled, like, you know, the marketing and all of that stuff with this. But in terms of bringing this game to retail, Nintendo helped out with that. So back on the GameCube, in PAL regions, Nintendo helped bring Resident Evil 4 to retail. You know, they helped distribute it, but Capcom was still the publisher of that game. But over here on the Nintendo Switch in North America and Europe, I mean, they helped put out, what, Grand Theft Auto the Trilogy, Red Dead Redemption, Dark Souls Remastered, the No More Heroes games, Doom, Wolfenstein 2, Skyrim, Deadly Premonition 2. Thank God they helped bring that game to retail. So yeah, even though Nintendo's not necessarily putting their names on these games, they are helping out with them, which, you know, hey, I'd say they're part of the honorary club. And what a club to be a part of. All right, so let's talk Wii and Wii U between GameCube and Nintendo Switch. Wii, there's really not a lot. Now, around the Wii era, Nintendo started working with Tecmo Koei on the Fatal Frame series. For a while there, Fatal Frame became kind of a Nintendo exclusive series, which is really strange, but to be fair, I mean, you know, the control scheme of the Wii Remote and the Wii U gamepad, you know, kind of landed itself well to, you know, a photography game about ghosts. Again, it's really weird how the majority of these Nintendo M-rated games are like horror-themed or horror-based. But yeah, much like how Resident Evil started as a multi-platform series and then for the GameCube generation went exclusive to Nintendo, Fatal Frame was a similar thing. Fatal Frame was kind of the next in line for M-rated series Nintendo was going after. And, you know, I don't think that worked out nearly as well, but, you know, hey. So there were 2 exclusive Fatal Frame games on Wii that Nintendo published. There was Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, but that was Japan only. But then there was a remake of Fatal Frame 2, and that ended up coming out in Europe. Now, the remake, which in Europe was called Project Zero 2 Wii Edition, that was rated PEGI 16, even though, you know, Fatal Frame 2, back on the original PS2 and Xbox, was rated M, so, you know, I don't give a damn, I'm counting it. Same goes for Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, which was the Wii exclusive one. That was rated Sero C in Japan, which M rating, it kind of translates over to Sero D. F off, I'm including it. But other than those, the Wii was definitely kind of an off season for Nintendo and their M-rated shenanigans. Especially on the handhelds. They never really published anything M-rated on their handhelds. I mean, the DS as a whole has a distinct lack of M-rated games on it. And it helped distribute Resident Evil Deadly Silence on the DS in Europe, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. We already talked about distribution. They're a part of the honorary club. Let's talk Wii U, because this is where Nintendo published, like, the most M-rated games they had really up to this point. And I really think they were trying to prove their worth in the hardcore space. Because right alongside the Wii U at launch, we got Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. M-rated game. And, yeah, are you sure you want to die on this hill, Nintendo? The original Ninja Gaiden 3 got blasted in reviews when that released, mainly just due to how, like, simplified it was. Now, I wouldn't say it's a bad game. I think, like, a lot of the ratings that rated it, like, super low, like, I think it's a little ridiculous. Like, rating it, like, a 6 out of 10, I understand, but, like, IGN rated that thing a 3. And, like, in my opinion, like, a 3 should be reserved for, like, this thing barely works, instead of, this isn't the game I wanted it to be. And the history of Ninja Gaiden 3 is really strange, because before the original version for 360 and PS3 launched in March of 2012, they announced, like, Razor's Edge for the Wii U at E3 2011. So before the original even launched, they announced an updated re-release for Wii U. And I remember at E3 2011, like, the crowd cheered. They were like, oh my god, Ninja Gaiden 3 is coming out for the Wii U. And then at E3 2012, after Ninja Gaiden 3 launched and people weren't too hot on it, a lot of, like, they showed it in a little scissor reel of, like, games coming to Wii U, and everybody went, oh my god, Ninja Gaiden 3's coming to the Wii U? But hey, Nintendo was handling the publishing duties. They've always had a very close relationship with Tecmo Koei. I mean, hey, they published the Fatal Frame games. They worked with them and the developer of Ninja Gaiden 3, Team Ninja, on, like, Metroid Other M, and they would continue to work with Tecmo Koei on games like Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors. Like, I feel like Nintendo is trying to really be like, hey, you know, like, let's do this because we want to kind of, like, beef up our relationship with Tecmo Koei, while also showing everybody, hey guys, we can publish M-rated games too. We're here for the hardcore gamer. Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. Who gives a shit? This is not a bad game. It's definitely the best version of Ninja Gaiden 3. Of course, like, it's the best version of, you know, the worst Ninja Gaiden game in the series, or at least, like, you know, the main series. There's that Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z game. And this also wasn't really, like, a Nintendo game at all. It was a Tecmo Koei game that Nintendo was kind of publishing, and then only a couple months after this version came out, Razor's Edge specifically came out on 360, PS3, and now it's also on, like, Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One. So yeah, I mean, like, it's an M-rated Nintendo game, but, like, it's not really much of a Nintendo game. But I'd say this would count as one. Bayonetta 2. This might be, like, the most lucrative M-rated game Nintendo's ever published. Much like Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, I feel like Nintendo really pushed for this game. Not necessarily because, like, oh yeah, we need, like, this game on our platform because, like, it's gonna sell millions of copies, but rather definitely just to show people that they were serious about bringing more of a hardcore audience to their system. So what better way to show that than to help fund the sequel to, like one of the most beloved hack and slashes on 360 and PS3. And without Nintendo, this game wouldn't have been made. And it's just pretty crazy because I remember when the first Bayonetta came out, you know, it was revered in reviews, but, you know, never in a million years would I have expected, like, Bayonetta to become pretty much a Nintendo series. But it's very strange because, like, it's not actually a Nintendo series, but Nintendo is so, like, keen on just, like, keeping it as, like, a pseudo Nintendo series, because Sega published the original Bayonetta and they still own the copyrights to Bayonetta. So, like, every Bayonetta game, like Bayonetta 2 and Bayonetta 3, even though they're published by Nintendo, even though they wouldn't exist without Nintendo, they all have to say, like, copyright Sega and Nintendo. But that's also how, like, the original Bayonetta is able to come out on stuff like the PS4 and Xbox One. I have the Bayonetta and Vanquish 10th anniversary bundle on those platforms, and it's just interesting to have Bayonetta on a non-Nintendo platform, even though it started as a non-Nintendo series. I don't know, it's one of those, like, weird things that's not actually weird, that kind of just, I don't know, it's just interesting to look at. It's interesting to own. It's interesting to play the Bayonetta series on a non-Nintendo platform. But yeah, Bayonetta 2 was such a strong title on the Wii U. Maybe not in terms of sales, but just in terms of what it represented, and also the quality of the game itself. I mean, Bayonetta 2 is one of the greatest hack and slashes ever. I mean, like, every single fight, every single scenario in this game plays as if it's the final boss of the game. It's wild, and it is just so exhilarating to play this game. The Bayonetta 2 feels like they put their all into this. Seriously, because, like, they pulled out all the stops. The original Bayonetta is included here. So hell, now we have to add Bayonetta 1 to the list. This is another Nintendo published game. You know, it released everywhere, but Japan got, you know, it in its own special case. And yeah, this is an interesting note for more adult games on the Wii U in Japan. But yeah, they all have kind of this darker scheme and a black case. But yeah, just with these two games alone and just the critical reception and just the excitement surrounding all of this, I think it's easy to say, like, the Bayonetta series kind of became like the go-to M-rated Nintendo series, even though it's not actually like a Nintendo series. It's a Sega series. But it's like I don't know, man. I mean, like, Sega owns the copyright, but, like, they wouldn't be doing anything with this franchise if it wasn't for Nintendo. Like, I never see Sega even, like, talk about the Bayonetta series. They own the copyright, but they're just like, yeah, Nintendo, just do whatever you want. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say the Bayonetta series is, like, the most lucrative M-rated Nintendo series. If only we were in a different timeline. Because Devil's Third deserves some respect. It's not good, but it has its merit. Devil's Third is such an interesting story. You know, I've made a Scott the Woz episode on it, but that was years ago. But I stand by my thoughts about it, though I will definitely say, like, it's not great, but I don't think it deserves, like, all the super low review scores it got at the time. It got some decent review scores here and there. I think it reviewed fairly positively in Japan, but here in North America, like, people trashed this game. You know, yeah, I can see why. It's definitely not perfect, but there are some things about this game that are actually, like, kind of fun and pretty good. But overall, like, the single player campaign, while it has its moments, it's really funny to laugh at, but it's just, a lot about it just feels kind of trashy. But the gunplay in this game, the action, like, it all kind of works fairly well, in my opinion. Again, it's not the greatest, but I think it's an all right game. I would give it like a 5 to a 6 out of 10. I'm not saying it's great, but, like, not a 3. But the history of this game is pretty wild. Like, it was originally announced as, like, an Xbox 360 exclusive, and then Microsoft dropped out. Like, Microsoft was going to publish this game, and then THQ picked it up and was going to publish it on Xbox 360 and PS3, and then THQ went bankrupt. So then, you know, Valhalla Games Studios, the developer of this game, went to Nintendo and Satoru Iwata and asked them to publish the game, and Nintendo was apparently just like, well, we need more online multiplayer games, and that was a larger component of Devil's Third. Oh, there was a PC version of the game that was only the online multiplayer. So they agreed to publish Devil's Third, and technically Nintendo is labeled as kind of like you know, they helped out with some development here on the Wii U version. So you know, this is you know, an M-rated Nintendo game, a Nintendo developed M-rated game, sort of. And yeah, so it was finally re-announced at E3 2014. Nintendo didn't announce it. They let IGN announce it for them on, like, one of their live shows after their big digital event. I don't think Nintendo of America really acknowledged this game much at all. I think they kind of knew, like, this was a bit of a this was a bit of, like, a niche title that, like, they weren't necessarily super proud of. It's just one event led to another where they ended up being the publisher of it. So here it is. And yeah, so it launched in Europe and Japan, and, you know, kind of word spread around that, you know, it was a bit of a love it or hate it kind of title. Some people claimed it was horrible. Others were like, it's not too bad. Rumors started spreading about the fact that the North American release here was canceled. Nintendo of America was not interested in publishing this, which, you know, there could have been maybe an opportunity for maybe a publisher like Xseed to come on in and publish it for them. They did that with The Last Story and Pandora's Tower. Those were Nintendo published games in Europe and Japan, but you know, around the Wii era, Nintendo was a lot more frugal with what they wanted to publish over here. You know, it's something that's like, all right, you know, you don't want to publish those games, but you want to publish Mystery Case Files, the Malgrave Incident. But there was a lot of word that Nintendo of America was like, no, we're not doing this. But, you know, with enough outcry, they made a statement. They were like, Devil's Third will come to the Wii U later this year, don't worry. You know, it took a couple more months than the Europe and Japanese releases, but in December of 2015, we got Devil's Third, published by Nintendo. They even gave it its own unique box art. You know, this isn't like the European and Japanese one, which is weird. You'd think, like, if they didn't care, they would have just given this, like, the Japanese box art. They would have been like, who cares? But no, they went out of their way to, like, give this its own box art. I don't get it. Like, like, it's like, what? You wanted this to do slightly okay? You wanted to maybe change the box art to look a little more, like, special for the North American audience? Well, if you wanted that, then why did you only supply, like, 500 or something copies across the entire United States? There's a report that, like, GameStop only received, like, copies in the hundreds across all the GameStops. Like, this game was super hard to find for a bit there. Eventually, Amazon got, like, a big restock. So, you know, I got mine for only 60 bucks on Amazon, like, in February or something. But that didn't last long, as Devil's Third eventually became, like, one of the more expensive Wii U games to get. Like, just look it up on eBay. It's a bit pricier. And couple that with the fact that the Wii U eShop is down, the fact that the PC online-only version of the game, yeah, that shut down like a year and a half in or something. And that all adds up to a Wii U game that is pretty expensive for what it is. Just a sloppy-ass little action game. But you know what? It's not that bad. And I think there's a chance that if you play it, you'll be like, you know what? This is kind of fun. But that wasn't the only M-rated game Nintendo published on Wii U. We have this one right here. This is Fatal Frame, made in a Blackwater, and it only got a physical release in Japan and Europe. This is the European version. And yeah, this was M-rated as well. I'm not too hot on this game. I didn't find it necessarily like that spooky, but the concept alone, I definitely really like it for the fact that you're using the Wii U gamepad to take, you know, as your camera obscura, to take pictures of ghosts. You know, it's one of the few games that I'd say, you know, fully takes advantage of the Wii U gamepad. And, you know, Nintendo helped out with this game. There are Nintendo-themed costumes in this game. And yeah, it kind of follows what they started on the Wii with Tecmo Koei to kind of make the Fatal Frame series, you know, a bit Nintendo exclusive. There was Spirit Camera on the 3DS, which was a Fatal Frame spin-off, but you know, that was rated teen, you know? 13-year-olds can play that. You know what 13-year-olds can do? Play this. All right, so let's finish up on the Nintendo Switch. Now, technically speaking, we do have, you know, the Bayonetta series again. Bayonetta 1, 2, and 3, all on Nintendo Switch. There's not much more to say about that other than what I've already said about Bayonetta 2 on Wii U. So, you know, Bayonetta's on Switch. But Miitopia is just kind of silly, mainly because it is rated 18 plus in Russia. You know, it's rated E here. No, that's not what we're talking about. I just like the fact that, like, somewhere Miitopia is rated M. Well, why is that? Well, it all started with Tomodachi Life, back when that launched on the 3DS. You know, there was a bit of controversy about that game because there were no gay relationships that could possibly happen. So, you know, that was a little silly. So that was a bit of an oversight. And in response, Nintendo said that next time we'll make a new entry in the Tomodachi Life series, we'll make sure to have better representation. And I guess Miitopia counts as the next entry in the Tomodachi Life series, which I'm a little like, eh. Miitopia has its charm. I'm not trying to take away from that. It was originally a 3DS game, so, you know, it does kind of feel like, you know, it is kind of continuing that Tomodachi Life tradition, but I like Tomodachi Life more. Miitopia is trying to be more of a game, and I don't think it's a very good game. When it's trying to be silly, it can be kind of fun, but when I'm actually playing it as a game, I don't give a damn. Like, it's just such a bare-bones, simple RPG. And it's just like everything that people like about the game has to do around like the meme maker and the silly things that can happen. But at that point, I'm like, yeah, then just play Tomodachi Life. It's a million times better. It's not trying to be a game. Miitopia is trying to be more of a game and it's failing at it. And I don't like the fact that it doesn't have the creepy text-to-speech thing. I love that about Tomodachi Life. It connects you way more to the characters, whereas with Miitopia, like, the characters just have speech bubbles. And I've said this before, but it's pretty much the equivalent of just writing, like, oh, yeah, I like on a post-it note and putting it next to your friend's face and going, haha, look what you said. With Tomodachi Life, not only can you read what they're saying, you can hear what they're saying too, and it makes it a little more funny. But regardless, Miitopia being kind of lame as a game isn't why it was rated M. It's the fact that, yes, Nintendo kept to their promise, and you can have same-sex relationships in Miitopia. And that's apparently enough for Russia to rate this game an 18+. Oh my god. It's so scary. That's just dumb as hell, but hey, it is kind of silly that a Nintendo-developed game is rated 18+, and not only a Nintendo-developed game, it's fucking Miitopia. But hey, that puts a bookend on M-rated Nintendo games. You know, we're definitely gonna see more in the future. Hell, they have the Nintendo 64 18+ app. Ooh, that sounds fucking vulgar, but it's more so because, you know, hey, on Nintendo Switch Online, you know, you just download an app for an older system, and then all the games are right there. But of course, you know, like, I don't think Nintendo wants, you know, the app you download to play Mario 64 to be rated M. So if they want to add M-rated games or higher-rated games, you know, just put them in its own separate app. So, you know, that's fair. More fair than the length of time I spent today talking about Geist. I'm really sorry. I'll try harder next time. Hold up, pause, rewind. Did you know that I usually film most of these videos far in advance? This was filmed in February of 2024. I have more to say, obviously. Yes, in August of 2024, Nintendo released Emio the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club, another M-rated game. Compared to the other M-rated games I just discussed, this one was far more hands-on by Nintendo themselves. It's the third entry in the Famicom Detective Club series. You know, the famous series that nobody gave a damn about until like 3 years ago when they made remakes of it for Nintendo Switch. And even saying people gave a damn about those is being very nice. It was definitely pretty damn cool to see these old, obscure parts of Nintendo history remade and presented in a more modern way. You know, they were early examples of visual novels back in the day, and now, you know, you present them in a more modern context, and it shows just how well they age. I wouldn't say they're the greatest visual novels of all time, but they're solid times, and I'd say the remakes are easily the definitive versions of those first two games. But getting a third game this far down the line, that wasn't really on my bingo card. This wasn't either. The marketing strategy of this game was both genius and also just absolutely just criminal. Showing off this realistic, spooky footage for a full week. You know, we didn't know what the hell this was. You know, it was just obvious, hey, Nintendo's making an M-rated horror game. And then it turns out to be the third entry in the Famicom Detective Club series. Really cool. Like, we can't understate that. But that initial ad really made it seem like we were getting like a fully traditional like third-person survival horror game or something like that for Nintendo Switch. In reality, it is a visual novel with very serious and spooky themes. But hey, that marketing strategy put a lot more eyes on this release than there would have been otherwise. I also think it disappointed a lot of people, mainly because the teaser implied what we were getting was not necessarily a 2D visual novel. But you know, I love the fact Nintendo does this kind of stuff. You know, I'm not gonna act like I'm a big Famicom Detective Club fan, but the little I've played of Emio so far, like, it is an interesting visual novel. You know, I can tell why they decided to do a third entry, especially after the remakes turned out to be, you know, pretty decent. The M rating on this one is definitely due to the very serious themes of this game and the overall just spooky tone. Like, this can be a creepy ass game, and I think it's really cool that Nintendo didn't really hold back here. You know, they probably could have very easily toned it back down to be a teen rating, but the story they wanted to tell here was a lot more serious. And you know, the fact that we have a third entry in the Famicom Detective Club series and it's M rated and it looks just like the remakes, hey, That's really cool. And honestly speaking, even though it would have been cool if that Emio teaser that Nintendo posted turned out to be more of a traditional survival horror game, I feel like this is probably the best possible outcome. I don't know about you, but the idea of like this AAA survival horror game on Nintendo Switch, published by Nintendo, yeah, for some reason, I don't really see that turning out as high quality as this one did. Yeah, sure, it's not as inherently exciting, but you know, I think this is a historic moment, and it's also just a very high-quality visual novel. Of course, Nintendo isn't the full developer of this game. It was developed by Mages, who did the other two Famicom Detective Club remakes, but, you know, primary Nintendo staff worked on this. You know, the original producer of the Famicom Detective Club games, you know, returned for this one. You know, this is a Nintendo game, one that a 16-year-old could not dare play. So there we go. I have finally talked about all of the M-rated Nintendo games. What a disgusting family.